Hey everyone, we're back, ready to start. All right. So, let's see. Camera's on. Got Francielli, David. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. I don't know what happened there, but Verona decided to take over for some reason. All right. Cool. So, what was I gonna say? I even lost my train of thought right in the beginning. Unbelievable. What was I gonna tell you guys? Who can tell me what? Oh, you don't know either? Okay, fine. I was talking about attendance. Oh, I was taking attendance. That's what I was doing. Friday. Is it Friday? It is, right? All right, cool. All right, so again, we got Franceli, we got David, Erica, Yvette. We have Brian, Nurka. Oh, you changed your name, Nurka. Okay, good. I had Lucas there for a second. We got Bianca, Stephanie M, Miguel, Fabiola, Vanessa. We have Elena. You're not in the car. Wow. Miracle. We have Alondra, Verona, that was interrupting my class already from the get-go. Unbelievable. Robin is there somewhere. Muslima's there somewhere. And Jeffrey's there too. All right, cool. So, are you guys cool? How's reviewing everything from last night? Any questions? Wow, Vanessa's starting with a 5-hour shot. We only have 4 hours here, Vanessa. You don't have to drink a 5-hour shot, okay? Oh, so you, you look like those little 5-hour shot things. All right. Now that Ingrid joined us, we can start. All right, guys. So here's what I'm going to do, just in case. I'm going to send you guys the chapter, and I'm also going to send it on WhatsApp. So go get it now. Run. So I could then remove it from WhatsApp and not cause any confusion. Okay. Why? What? Why am I sending you the chapter? It's not a mess. It's just that you have. I'm not comparing chapters anymore. I'm done doing that. You have first edition. I got second edition. I just want to make sure you're getting the right one, just in case something is missing. Boom, it's right there. Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you got it. Cool. All right. Great. Being deleted from the chat. Just anticipating potential delays. That's all. So before we start, I'm gonna tell you guys real quick. Glad Chris is on too. Hey Chris, did you get my message? All right, just making sure. All right, so I'm gonna address real quick the phone call that I just had. I was on a 1 hour call, with a student of mine that moved to a different state, and that student of mine was telling me it's not about being in a different state. That was just a quick reference. But what happened with this student is the student was dragged into a scam. What is a scam? Some people out there, like I have an investment club as an example. And in the investment club, I bring people to participate in the club. And the same way that we make the funds available to the people in the group, we also invest the money in properties and flip them for profits and give returns on whatever we find, whatever we earn, right? So in Texas, this student was presented with a similar opportunity to start investing in real estate. Now, the company that presented that is in New York. It's a New York company, right? And what happened is they took her money and a bunch of other people's money, and there's nothing wrong with that because that's how you will invest or participate or be partners or member of the club, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But they took their money with a promise of investing the money, with a promise of fixing the credit, which she paid for as well. And apparently they got to fix her credit, which is a part that's a little weird here. To fix her credit, they needed her log in to the credit reports. They also needed to do something with her SIM card or whatever it is to be able to make phone calls as if it was her. And a bunch of other things that are a little fishy in the whole transaction. Like, an investment club is an investment club, and there's a bunch of them out there. Like, I'm just going to be another one that's around, right? But be careful. They were even investing, according to what my student was telling me right now over this 1 hour call, they were investing in fake properties. So the way they were presenting the returns on the money to the members was, hey, we invested in this property, we're flipping, and we're going to give this much return, which to you represents X amount of dollars in the future. So they're not really presenting what they did, they're faking their investment. Are you guys understanding what's happening here? All right. So I explained then to the student a few years ago, I fell into a similar trap. The problem was, it was somebody that I trusted. So this guy, Charles, he was the, or Chuck, as a lot of people know him too. He was an investor, part of a similar network, right? Not the same network, but we met through a merger of networks at one point, like a merger event. So two different investing networks made a bigger network for that particular day, right? And I met him then, and for years, I dealt with him. For years, I dealt with him, exchanging opinions, throwing him deals. He was throwing me deals, and vice versa. And then one day he comes up with, hey, I'm creating an investment club, or something similar to that, investment group, right? Whatever you want to call it. And the way it works is we build your credit and for X amount of dollars, and then we help you. So very similar. We help you invest, and we help you this, and we help you that. I'm like, cool. Know you for years. You, your wife, your kids know you for years. So why not? I gave him money. I sent him the money. I invested in his idea because it's somebody I knew, right? Again, nothing wrong with the proposition. Sorry, just 1 second. Nothing wrong with that proposition. What's wrong is what happened next. Hold on, cops passing by. What's wrong is what happened next. And I'm sorry about the story, but I think it's a great alert, and because there's a lot of scams out there, investment scams. And since you guys are involved in real estate, anything you search eventually pops up in your search saying, hey, you just looked up this type of investment. Would you like to? Right? So there's going to be a lot of stuff like that, right? So I'm giving you the heads up. And what happened after, when I gave money to this guy, is I never got my returns. I'm like, no problem. I knew it was for the long run. I don't care. I know the guy, right? Until I start calling him about 2 years later. I say, hey, I didn't get returns from last year, and this year I haven't seen anything yet. What's going on? And he's not answering. All of a sudden, his assistant not answering either. A year later, I receive a notice from the police department down in where he's from. I received a notice federal lawsuit against him for RICO charges, racketeering, right? Influence, corruption, and so on. So I'm like, wow, somebody I trusted, right? They took my money and invested the money in whatever they wanted. And now, even though federal court says you have to pay the people back, when will I recover the money? Right? What if they can never get another job because of that federal lawsuit? Oh, you were a RICO case? Yeah, you're not becoming anything that needs papers. So go search for a McDonald's. That's probably where you're going to be flipping stuff, right? So my point is, you know, if you have questions, like at this point, I've been burned so much, and I made a lot of money, I lost a lot of money, and I've been burned so much that what I can tell you guys is, if you ever have questions regarding something like this student, it's funny because about 6 months ago, when I saw what the student was doing, getting into advertising, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, investments, and this is how it is. And like I asked, hey, what is that all about? Maybe something we can work together on, right? You're there, I'm here, right? Something we can work together. She explained what it was. I went to research a little bit. I was not too fond of the idea. There's a few things already that gave me, didn't, didn't sit well, right? So I decided just to let it be, so I did reach out at the time, and I did explain what I was doing, and I explained her to be careful and this and that, right? And I was right. Apparently I was right. So if you have any questions regarding investments, regarding an investment group that reach out to you, or you're presented to, whatever, if you want my opinion, like no cost, no charge, that really doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that you guys don't fall into a scam if I can prevent it, right? I'm not saying that you won't fall into a scam, but what I can tell you is, I'll give you my honest opinion about what I feel of that particular program that you might be getting yourself into, right? So that was on the serious note. Now, on the fun note, we have chapter 21, which is closings. Closings is about money. That means we get to help somebody sell, help somebody buy, and get paid to help other people. Isn't that the best thing about our business? We get paid to help others. Right? Nothing better than that. So, do you guys have any questions after all this? Do you guys have any questions before I proceed? And again, I'm sorry for the whole rant, but had to. Okay. You're welcome. Very welcome. All right. And I think I did the same thing to Chris when you called me when he left me a message this morning. I told you my opinion. It's something that we can definitely discuss after. But it is what it is. When you guys have questions, especially real estate investments, retirement programs, anything that I'm already involved in, why not? Right? All right. Cool. Next. Closings. So yesterday was an extensive chapter, right? Today is not going to be any easier. It is the only chapter we covered today as well. It is very lengthy. There's a lot of things that leads to a closing, and you need to be prepared for those things and prepare your clients for it, both the seller and the buyer. All right, so let's go over this. Like we're preparing for a movie, the setting, the closing process, transfer of title, transfer of funds. So that's what it is, the closing event. So the actual exchange or conveyance of the property involves several things. So the setting, the closing event, for a Friday night, might as well get some wine in the fireplace. It's the culmination of the real estate transaction. During this event, the buyer pays the purchase price and receives title to the purchased real estate. At the same time, the buyer completes the financing arrangements, and the buyer and seller pay all the required taxes, fees, and charges. So you're going to learn today who pays what in a closing as well, because it's not just the buyer paying, the seller also has some fees that they have to pay. Okay? Customary practices. So of course they vary from state to state. And for example, it is common for some states, the sellers to pay for title insurance, while in other states, the buyer and seller might share this expense. And I'll tell you right now, in some states, the buyer pays for everything. So either the seller pays, the buyer pays, or they share the expense. Students should refer, obviously, to the supplemental portion, which is your state portion. We'll talk about that when we get to state to figure out how it applies in New Jersey or any other state, okay? Time. The sales contract sets the date of closing, usually within 60 days of signing. So we can predict pretty much that we put an offer today, and if the offer is accepted, the intended or estimated or anticipated closing date, as we see these different terms in different MLSs. GSMLS, for example, says anticipated closing date. That is stipulated right up front. We're going to close 60 days from now, and we put an actual time frame to that. So if today is October 9th, then we're going to close December 9th, as an example, right? So we put the anticipated date of closing. Could that change? Could the time frame change? The answer is yes. It could vary based on appraisals. It could vary based on inspections. It could vary based on title issues that need to be corrected. So there might be some delays. But we're telling you up front, this is what we expect. So 60 days, depending on how the market is, sometimes 90 days. But we try to be within 45 to 60. So hopefully closing a month and a half. Very difficult sometimes. Everybody needs to cooperate. But 60 is a good average. So 2 months is a good average. Location. Closing might occur at various locations. Could be at the office of the title company, the lender, the escrow agent, one of the attorneys, the broker, or the county recorder. Closing doesn't have an exact place to happen. It could be at the house even, if that's what we agree to, right? So closing could take place at various locations. The contract specifies where. The parties at closing. So the primary parties at the closing are normally the buyer, seller, of course, a closing agent or escrow officer, usually the title company in most states, and recently in New Jersey as well. We used to have the attorney doing the closing. More and more, the attorneys are passing that along to the title companies to do, because there are a disinterested third party. Now, other parties might be present: title officer, attorneys, brokers or agents, and lender's rep. It's not actually necessary for any of these parties to attend the meeting. The closing agent can complete the transaction provided that all documents have been duly executed in advance. So, also, more and more, we're finding transactions where the buyer never met the seller never met the buyer, right? So we get to a closing table and the seller already signed everything 30 minutes before you, the buyer, signed. So more and more we're getting to that separation where emotions don't drive the sale, okay? Because what would happen a lot of times is we're at the closing table and emotions drive the sale right at the last minute. Hey, this needs to be done. That needs to be done, right? And when the other party's not there, you can be more objective towards your requests and also the response from the other side. Okay? Robin has a question. Me as a buyer have nothing to do with the seller. There's more coming, right? Me as a buyer, me as a buyer had nothing to do with the seller. That was in Georgia. So you as a buyer, buying the house, or buyer agent? Because a buyer has nothing to do with the seller. That's what I'm asking. Okay. And you had nothing to do with the seller, meaning you never saw the seller. You never spoke to the seller. Is that what it is? Okay. So yeah, well, it's what I was telling you. More and more that's happening everywhere. Even here in New Jersey, we close the buyer a few minutes after we closed the seller's portion. Could there be a request that we're all at the same time there? Yes, but it's becoming very what do you call it? Very rare for those things to happen. I've done closings where I don't even go to the location. Everything is e-signature now, especially because of the whole COVID thing. Like the title company I use, everything was upgraded to e-signatures, e-notaries, e-everything, right? So I didn't even go there, right? Now, the closing process. The closing process consists of the buyer and seller verifying that each have fulfilled the terms of the sales contract. If they have, then the mortgage loan, if any, is closed. All the expenses are apportioned and paid, and considerations exchanged for the title. So final documents are signed and arrangements are made to record the transaction according to local laws. So if you guys remember, when we were talking about financing, chapter 17, we talked about closing the loan, right? And I told you that there's two closings that actually happen. There's closing the loan itself, and then there's closing the title or transfer itself. Why closing the loan? Because the finance must be distributed, the money must be distributed to the escrow agent that verifies, well, we got the money, so it's clear to close. Guys, seller, buyer, exchange. Simple. Until the money hits the account, the closing cannot happen. So two closings, right? Here you go. We confirm, like after everything, after all those days or months or whatever, we confirm everything. At the closing table, we wait for the loan to hit the account, so clear to close. The expenses are dispersed. We sign everything and exchange keys for the monies. Simple. What happens after? We traditionally do not do that as agents. The buyer or the seller traditionally do not do that as consumers of this service or product, right? The title company, the attorney, whoever is the escrow agent is usually responsible for recording it. They'll give you copies of everything, but they will record it and sometimes later on send you an email, hey, this was recorded, or send you by mail the piece that was recorded, so a copy of that confirmation. The seller must produce, so for the closing to exist, the seller must produce evidence of a marketable title. You guys remember rotten milk? Okay, yes? Rotten milk, no? Come on, you remember that. Milk expired by date, all that good stuff. Okay, all right, cool, we got it. So that's what it is. The seller must produce evidence of marketable title. That means that there's no issues with the title other than those that we accepted, and we can transfer the title to you with those conditions. Okay? Such a commitment for title insurance, such as a commitment for title insurance by a title insurer. Before making the title commitment, the title company performs the title search. We covered this already. They'll look for any liens, encumbrances, restrictions, conditions, or easements attaching to the title. If there's any encumbrances or liens that damage the title, the seller is expected again to clear the problems, unless, of course, we agree to. The most common title cloud is the unpaid lien, like a mortgage. It must be cleared before it transfers. Like a water bill must be cleared before it transfers. Like a tax bill must be cleared before it transfers. All right. So these are the most common title cloud issues. The seller may also be asked to execute an affidavit of title stating that since the date of the original search, the seller has incurred no new liens, judgments, unpaid bills for repairs or improvements, no unrecorded deeds or contracts, no bankruptcies or divorces that would affect the title, or any other defects that the seller is aware of. So, guys, all we said here was seller is going to sign a document, which is called Affidavit of Title, that says, I promise that what I told you so far is true, so help me God. That's pretty much what it is, right? Because they're going to swear and subscribe. That's why it's an affidavit, sworn and subscribe that everything I said is true, and you as a buyer will have no surprises. That's what it is. But if I'm wrong, again, that's why it's an affidavit. If I'm wrong, you can come after me. Now, if you have title insurance, do you think the buyer is going to go after the seller? No. Title company takes actions against the seller. All right? So they will protect you. That's why we have title insurance, and this helps you defend your title. So sellers, right before closing, must issue the affidavit of title. Okay. Yvette has a question coming through. Do all utilities need to be paid prior to closing? So water bill, sewer bill, yes. Electrical bills, that's you. So usually not a problem. When the buyer goes request utilities, usually the deed is there to show, hey, I have nothing to do with the previous person. All right, so that will stay on the previous person's record. Should everything be down to zero and notified that we're going to leave? Yeah. Or the day you're leaving, should you turn off the services in that house? Sure. I had a situation where the owner did not pay electric to town and they would not turn on. Okay, so there's only 9 towns in the state of New Jersey. Don't ask me how I know this. But there's only 9 towns in the state of New Jersey that actually provide their own electrical service. Okay? So Milltown is one of them. Was that the place? No? Or was it in New York? South River as well? Okay, so that's the second town. Now I know 2. I know by Milltown because it was an actual property that I helped somebody buy, a friend of mine. So anyway, that's a public service. So anything that's public service, yeah, it's attached to the property. So water, sewer, and in this case, electric. Right? Or you're in South River, complain to some Portuguese guy. They will fix it. They have the Portuguese club there too. We are everywhere. Like, unbelievable. Can't stand them anymore. All right, so yes, it should be taken care of. But like I said, if it's a municipal lien, then it's on you. It's against the house. Yep. Could you go after, how much was it, if you don't mind me asking? Over $1,000? All right. So you could literally go after those $1,000 plus penalties and a bunch of other stuff. Now, is it worth it? That's the only question. Is it worth fighting for? Because there was representation by an attorney, most likely, or a realtor representing the seller. If there was, then you contact them. Hey, your client owes us $1,000. Send them the bill without lawsuit. Give it a try. Hey, Chris, you're missing a piece there. Chris is setting up the girl's room as he's taking class. I went through hell going back and forth and taking off work, but they finally turned it on. Okay, but that was with the city. What I'm talking about is the money owed. Send the bill to the attorney. Have your attorney send to whoever helped you close. Have them send to the other attorney and say, hey, your client owes us money. That's it. This is my notice, my first notice. If no response, then we'll pursue legal action. Because unpaid bills must be credited to you. Okay, we're going to talk about that today, actually. Yeah, Verona, the attorneys and title companies are supposed to cut out checks. We're going to talk about all this. They're supposed to cut out checks for all the unpaid bills, but they also ask, right before closing, they ask for you to go get the final bill. But did you know that some towns have the electrical bill supplied by them versus a public versus a private utility company? A lot of attorneys don't even know that. A lot of realtors don't even know, or even if they do, they forget because they deal with so many different towns. You got it? So could it skip my mind? Yeah, I forgot to tell you, I also owe electrical. It's municipal. Anyway, give it a try to do it the way I said it. Contact your attorney that helped you with the closing. Tell them, hey, there's this bill, belongs to the previous owner, and have your attorney send a notice to the other attorney. Right? Next. Do you think, buyers should do a final walkthrough? Do you think right before closing we should do a walkthrough? Anybody? And if the answer is yes, by the way, tell me why. If the answer is no, also tell me why. What's absolutely? Absolutely. Yes, because on time frame waiting for a close, something could have happened. Yep. Because you need to know that everything in the house is yes, the seller might swap things out. Yep. Make sure it didn't destroy the house, knock down walls, run water, flush out everything. Yep, do everything. Make sure the house is in the same condition as when you agreed to purchase it. Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. This is all great stuff. Because I'm selling the house to you, but my furniture is all in the way, as an example. Now we close, I remove all the furniture, and there's big holes on the wall, right? Electrical that was behind the furniture was never fixed, so there's a fire waiting to happen, right? For several reasons. So right before the closing, you should inspect the property. Do you have to? No. Should you? Yes. Which brings me to the second question. The second part of this question is when? Should it be as soon as possible? It should have been 24 hours before, or if possible, the day of. What would the answer be for you guys? If anybody's watching on YouTube, let me know as well. Reach out in the YouTube chat. Same day, the day of the closing, of course. So if it's impossible to do it the same day because the closing is at, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the morning, right? Then you do at least the day before. The latest in the day is possible, right? More than that, it makes no sense because they have until the last moment to replace stuff, as some of you wrote. Yes, to swap out things. Some sellers get upset of what? Me inspecting your property again? Well, you were a buyer once, so you should understand that. That's all you have to say. I just want to make sure I'm getting what I'm paying for. Or do they get upset because you might find something? Should the property be clear of all their stuff? If that's what you guys agree to, possession at closing, then the answer is yes. Traditionally, the buyer gets possession at closing. So if their stuff is still there right before the closing, then is it possible that you're going to get the keys, go there, and they're still there? Yeah. So make sure everything is removed. That's another reason. Like stuff that they don't want. Guys, come on. This morning I had somebody say something different in this. But anyway, let's keep it clean. So, no, it doesn't work. Okay, so try to clear it. So yeah, you should ask possession at closing that everything is broom clean. Broom clean means you don't have to do anything other than move in. Obviously, you should still clean the house before you move in and change locks, whatever. But it should be broom clean before you get there. All right, next. We just said, actually, let me go back up. We said here that the most common lien, right? The most common lien or cloud on the title is an unpaid lien. I'm sorry, unpaid. So that means it must be cleared before we close. How do we clear something that's unpaid? How do we clear something that's unpaid? The answer is we pay it off. To pay it off, what do we need? We need a payoff statement. That means you need to call or contact every single party that has an interest in the property, like a beneficial financial interest in the property. Contact them and say, hey, I'm about to sell the property. How much do I owe you? Give me a payoff statement so I can present at closing and you get paid. You got it? So every single one of them. It's not just the first mortgage. It's first mortgage, second, third, whoever is there. Utility bills we just talked about. Give me a payoff until whatever date, how much is owed. Right? And then the closing company will estimate, okay, if it's another day, if it's another week, how much will you owe in that bill? If there's delays between the payoff and the actual closing, then usually the closing agent will retain some type of escrow money for these unexpected amounts, like a water bill. I can get you the water bill until today, but if we close on a Saturday or a Sunday, or let's say we got postponed to a Monday morning, it's already 3 more days. You see what I'm saying? So they start estimating what's the daily rate for each one of these. And everything must be presented in those payoffs anyway. So we ask, Mr. Seller, I would like to hold part of your money in escrow just in case. Right? So this helps for Yvette's case. So we learned, guys, we all learned from this. In Yvette's case, what should we have asked for? For any surprises, let's hold in escrow. Always some type of money in escrow. $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. It's not going to hurt anybody because the money returns to you if there's no issues. If there are issues, things you never told me, I'm not hurt either. The money's right there, and your attorney or the title company will disperse that money if needed. Does that make sense? So always, always, always try to ask for, hey, let's put some money aside just in case you forgot something. Right? Oh, the light works. See? Electrical works, Yvette. You just paid it? That's it. So, again, make sure you always ask for that. I do that in all, like if I'm the one selling my properties or if I'm buying a property, I always provide and I always ask. Because you never know. Worst case scenario is like a savings with no interest, but it's a savings. Like it comes back to you. So it stays there, you don't touch it, so you don't waste it. And then all of a sudden, 2 months later, they're like, hey, there's no surprises, but I have here a check for you. Check for me. Yeah, remember you put $1,500, $2,000, whatever in escrow just in case? Like, yeah. All right, it's available. Where do you want me to send it to? Simple. It's like a forced savings process. There you go. All right. Finally, the seller produces and or deposits the escrow agent the deed that conveys the property to the buyer. And the buyer usually produces and or deposits with the escrow agent the following: the earnest money, the good faith deposit, right? The loan funds and documents, and any other cash needed to complete the purchase, right? Now, these usually we prepay to somebody. What they're saying here is that at closing, everything will be released towards the loan funds or closing costs. So if the closing occurs in escrow rather than face-to-face, the principal parties deposit funds and documents with an appointed escrow agent. The escrow agent disperses the funds and releases documents to the appropriate parties. So we've covered all this right here as what's becoming most common. We close in escrow. It's becoming more and more common. Where I told you earlier that sometimes we don't even sit at the same table. We go there as a seller, we sign paperwork, deposit what we need to deposit, and give the keys, right? Later on, shows up the buyer to collect the keys, transfer the funds, sign documents, and that's it. So it's not a face-to-face, is I'll see you later, if anything, right? Lender closing requirements, and we're superficially going over this part because either we already covered or is something that's not heavily tested. But lending closing requirements. The same way that you should do a final walkthrough, the lender, to see what the conditions of the property, the lender also wants to protect himself or herself, or it, if it's a company, right? They want to protect themselves from any misrepresentations, right? Or any fraudulent representations. So very similar, misrepresentations, fraudulent representations. And also make sure that everything is according to code. So make sure there's a CO if the town requires, right? Not every town requires a CO to be issued at transfer. So they want to make sure there's a CO. They want to make sure there's a survey, there's a property inspection, hazard insurance. So all of these is not requirements by the buyer. These are traditionally requirements by the lender. They will not commit to a loan unless all these have been verified. Show me the inspection report. Show me the appraisal report, right? The survey. Is this really what you're buying? Like a guy that bought a thin strip of land between two properties. He thought he was buying the whole land for $9,000. He bought a really thin piece of land right there. So imagine that was financed. What would the bank have to collect? Nothing, because he can't build. He can't alter it. All he can do is either sell to one side or sell to the other if they want to buy. So that's what the bank wants to know. Survey. What are we financing? The broker, so in this case is you guys. So when we say broker on this side is whoever is representing the seller or the buyer, right? Or both. It says a broker usually continues to provide service between the signing of the sale contract and the closing by helping to make arrangements for pre-closing activities such as inspections, surveys, appraisals, repairs, and generally taking steps to ensure the closing can proceed as scheduled. So what we're trying to say here is you guys are babysitters. You're adult babysitters, right? You know what's best for this baby to grow, right? And you have to walk him through all these steps. So you're the one that has to explain the pre-closing arrangements. You guys got it? Who thought they were getting a babysitter job? Anybody? No? Nobody? Thumbs up if you're happy you're a babysitter? No? Okay. Well, you're a highly paid babysitter, just saying. All right, Nirka was happy. Cool. So our highly paid babysitter. That's our job. And believe me, like I always say, it's just like kids. You tell them not to, and what do? Don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that. They touch, right? Doesn't matter. Your kids, so your buyers or sellers, will always do exactly what you told them not to do, right? Next. A broker may conduct proceedings at the closing meeting or may have no further role in the transaction after sales contract is signed, depending on local practices, the transaction in question. So we have nothing else to do once we sign contract here in Jersey, for instance. That's it. Our job from now on is telling you, again, consulting, right? Babysitters, right? Our job is just to say, hey, this is what you should do. That's it. Can we do some stuff with them? Yes. Should we? Like I said, being the nice babysitter that we should be, should we walk him through, grab him by the hand, and help him cross the street? Absolutely. But our job is to be real estate consultants. In many states, the broker is charged with the responsibility for accuracy and timely delivery of closing documents to the principal parties. A broker may also have the responsibility for reporting the transaction to the IRS. Good thing, here in Jersey, for instance, nope, we don't have to do this. The title company, the attorneys, they decide to report to the IRS. We don't have to do anything. But in some states, it is a requirement that the broker handles everything beginning to end. Right? Finally, if the seller of the property is a non-resident alien, U.S. law might require the broker to withhold and transmit to the IRS a portion of the sales proceeds to cover the alien's seller's income tax liability. There's also special reporting requirements when the transaction involves a non-resident alien. And before you start thinking about undocumented, we're talking about the fact that anybody, anywhere in the world, can buy real estate anywhere in the world, right? Some churches even offer spaces in heaven. Some people offer space in the moon, and some are offering space in Mars. So we can buy real estate anywhere. We're aliens everywhere, right? So the point here is, if it's somebody foreign that's investing in the United States, there's special reporting because they do not hold a social security. They have a tax identification number, right? Cool. Great. Next, RESPA. Didn't we talk about RESPA already? Did you guys remember anything about RESPA? All right, Vanessa, you're saying yes. So what is RESPA, since you're nodding your head? Come on, you already drank like 3 of those little things, so you should be good to tell me the answer. As it says, I'll help you out. Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, right? How do we settle, or how do we close? Because that's the settlement of a transaction, right? It's the transfer from seller to buyer. So how do we close? Now, under RESPA, the new regulations we're going to talk about, we have TRID, which is a merger of, I'm going to write merged forms, so you guys write it too, merged forms, okay? As of October 3rd, 2015, TILA, Truth in Lending Act, and RESPA got integrated into one single form, where before we had 3 different forms for the same thing. I mean, for different things, but for the same purpose. Now we only have one, so it's easier to read and understand, okay? Oh, just give you a heads up, this whole section is heavily tested. Just heads up, all right? If you want to write in big bold letters, heavily tested, go ahead. Not heavenly, heavily. Okay? All right. Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act is a protection statute enacted in 1974, and its purpose, look right here. Every time you see RESPA, is to clarify settlement costs. See, with the Truth in Lending Act, if you guys remember, you're entitled to know how much that loan is going to cost you. Remember I said you go to Bank of America, you go to Wells Fargo, 5% is the same 5%, right? But APR is different, and every bank charges different financing charges on top of the basic or pure interest, right? So you're entitled to know so you can shop around various lenders and avoid the uninformed use of credit, right? With RESPA, we need to know how much we're going to pay in connection with the closing. What are the closing costs? What is the cost to settle, okay, this transaction? You guys got it? Say yes? Nod your head. All right, cool. Yanka went like, oh, that's not what we're doing? Okay, all right. I gotta mix things up, you know? See if you guys still awake. Otherwise, some of you already recorded this. You're putting your phone in front of the camera. Once in a while, thumbs up, right? Movement. You guys heard about that one, right? This college student that recorded himself and then just put the phone in front of the camera, right? As if he was attending class. And David's laughing like, yep, that was me too. All right, next. Not here, because I'm always calling you guys out, right? RESPA specifies certain closing procedures when to purchase. When the purchase involves residential property. So if you guys remember, I did mention this in finance chapter 17. I mentioned that both the Truth in Lending Act and RESPA are intended for residential property, right? So if it's commercial property, want me to go up? On your car, you're moving your head like go up, or are you just holding it back? Okay, all right, cool. She was like this, so I don't know if it was like Bruno, get away, or, you know, Yvette was like this the other day. I don't know. These signs. So I did tell you that it's mainly for residential. It is for first or second mortgage lien. It is for mortgages financed by a federally related mortgage loan. And it's intended usually for purchase only. So because this is at closing, right? So RESPA applies to residential property. It's the settlement cost of residential property. Okay? It involves a first and second mortgage or second mortgage lien, right? When it's financed by a federally related loan, so VAs, FHAs, and so on. So RESPA applies to these. We did mention this in chapter 17. We are repeating now. RESPA regulations do not apply to transactions being otherwise financed. So if they're not federally related financing, RESPA does not apply, except in the case of the assumption in which the terms of the assumed loan are modified or the lender charges for the assumption are greater than $50. So if you're taking over somebody else's loan, it still applies to you. That's what it says here. RESPA is directed at lenders and settlement companies. So it's not about the buyer or the seller, right? It's addressing lenders and title companies, for instance, telling them this is what you have to do. Okay, so this is like orders that were given to these entities. The Dodd-Frank Act of 2010 granted rulemaking authority under RESPA to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Exactly the information I gave to my student earlier. Here's the place where you can complain about that scam that I told you earlier, right? So Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, that company, the CEO of the company that was scamming, right? He had already been sued and was ordered to pay $1.6 million while running another company before. So what I did is I found her the contact of the attorney that won the case, and I said, hey, you guys contact this attorney, tell him he's doing it again, and it's now definitely a RICO case. So that's what we did. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, even though helpful, a lot of the times they don't do as much as they should. So it's like a phantom company. It's there, but it's really not there, right? So you don't always get the resolution you want. So always look for a consumer's advocate, such as an attorney that focuses in these types of things, just in case. So the CFPB has the authority to supervise and enforce compliance with RESPA and its implementing regulations. In 2013, the CFPB made substantive and technical changes to the existing regulations. Substantive changes include modifying the servicing transfer notice requirements and implementing new procedures and notice requirements related to, just reading it through, borrower's error resolution requests. So you can go after them for any mistakes in the transaction when it comes to lender or title company. Effective October 3rd, 2015, as I told you, TILA and RESPA integrated or merged the disclosure requirements. They merged the forms. And now they're known as TRID rules, okay, or TRID disclosures. That's Truth in Lending Act and RESPA disclosures. Before, we used to have the good faith estimate. We used to have HUD-1, which was the settlement statement or preliminary settlement statement, right? And now we have these merged, and now we have the LE, loan estimate, as we'll call it from now on, LE, loan estimate. And we have CD, which is closing disclosure. Now we're going to talk about this in a little bit. LE and CD must be almost identical. So it's one form. It's just LE is an estimate, as it says, of what you will probably pay in connection with this loan, while the CD is right before closing, right? If you guys remember, Verona was asking me, wait, Bruno, can you please tell me the order, right? Stop right there. Just, can you please answer my question? Remember that? Verona brought me back 3 times, and I thought I had answer, and I think I did. But anyway, so I did tell you guys you need to present your home loan toolkit. That's the first thing. Remember, Verona? You should know this, right? Your home loan toolkit before we even start anything. You prepare the application, and within 3 business days of receiving the loan application, the lender must provide the loan estimate. Right here. Within 3 business days of the application, lender must provide loan estimate. Muslima? Right here. TRID is Truth in Lending Act and RESPA integrated disclosures. That's where we merge the forms. Instead of having several disclosure forms at the beginning and at the end, we only have one form at the beginning and then one form at the end. That's all it is. What is the form? At the beginning, it's the loan estimate. Again, it will let you know what is most likely going to be the settlement costs and the loan costs. This estimate is usually based on comparable transactions completed in the area, and the terms stated in the closing disclosure must agree with those of the loan estimate within certain limits. So what you saw in the beginning should be the same thing you see in the end. Unless, of course, there was major changes, like escrow was incorrect, like the tax number was incorrect, insurance number was incorrect. We are going to talk about it. But let's say you said you qualify for this loan because you made a bonus, right? But when they verify your employment again, they can't verify the bonus. So your loan terms might change altogether, right? So therefore, a new loan estimate must be provided. So I'm going to explain that. So the point is, CD, so it's the final one, it's right before closing. The CD must be very similar or almost the same as the LE, loan estimate. You guys remember I said that that the loan could be sold from Bank of America to Chase, right? Okay. If they intend to do this, and again, this is the reason why there's different charges for the APR. Look what it says. The lender must disclose to the buyer whether the lender intends to service the loan or convey it to another lender for servicing. So are you a portfolio lender, if you guys remember, right? Or are you a warehouse lender where you're going to sell in the secondary market? This disclosure must be also accompanied by information on how the buyer can resolve complaints. So this is kind of like some of these things are a recap from chapter 17, right? Under CFPB rules, a lender must use the CD to disclose the settlement costs to the buyer. And this form covers all the costs that the buyer will have to pay at closing, whether the lender or other parties, whether to the lender or to other parties. The use of this form enforces RESPA's prohibitions against the lender requiring a buyer to deposit an excessive amount of tax or insurance escrow. Again, when you see tax or insurance deposits or payments, we're talking about escrow, right? Or to use a particular title company. So Section 9 of RESPA says you cannot force. So Section 8, if you guys remember, I mentioned briefly, Section 8 of RESPA, you cannot accept or pay any kickbacks for business referral. Section 9 says that neither the lender nor the seller can force the buyer to use a particular title insurance company. The buyer has to do whatever's best for him or her, right? And the consumer must receive the completed form, so the CD, the completed form, no later than 3 business days. So the CD, the closing disclosure, must be given to the consumer, so seller and buyer, no later than 3 business days before the closing. So, contract date, T. 1, 2, 3. So from here on, or up to this date, we provide the CD. Beyond this date, 3 business days before the closing, beyond this date right here, it's already in violation of the rules. So you have up to this date, up to the 3rd business days before the closing, to provide this form to the client, seller or buyer. Okay. Now, who provides this? Not you, the mortgage company. Okay. I don't violate. What happens if you violate? I don't violate. What happens if the bank violates those rules? Well, they could pay a penalty if you want, or they're gonna have to reissue another closing disclosure or postpone the closing date. That's what it is. Okay. But if you suffer any hardship because of those delays, right? We're gonna go over this. But if you suffer any hardship because of those delays, and you look at the lender for satisfaction of those that hardship, sure. All right. I did. There's another one you're missing. You see that? You're asking me if I answer Ms. Lima. Wait. It's okay. Just look here. 1, 2, 3. Bam. Grid. I'm just messing with you. I know it's a lot of information, so don't ever be offended. It's literally just me just messing with you. Like David had the chance to mess with me and he didn't when I forgot what I was doing earlier. I appreciate you, David. Thank you very much. I'm a sport. I'll take it. So if you want to mess with me, it's fine. Not today though, because it's Friday. But TILA is Truth in Lending RESPA Integrated Disclosures. Grid. I talked about Section 10. We talked about, okay, RESPA. Right here, this is Section 8 of RESPA. I did mention it, so it's right here. RESPA prohibits, you don't need to know that it's Section 8, but RESPA prohibits payment of fees as a part of real estate settlements when no services are actually rendered. RESPA prohibits payment of fees of a real estate settlement when no services is actually rendered. So you're not part of it. Let's say you're not the loan officer and you're asking for compensation. You do not perform the service, so the answer is no. If you are a licensed loan officer as well as the realtor, and this is a type of transaction where you can do both or participate as both, not a problem. As long as there's disclosures as well that you will receive compensation by referring the mortgage as well. All right? So it's just a matter of disclosing all the monies you're going to make out of this. Any questions before we go to the next topic? We only have one more week to go and then exam. That's it. Who's excited? Who's ready for the exam? All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, cool. Some of you were like, no. Okay. So as of Wednesday. As of Wednesday, you can now do the practice exam. So it's up to you if you want. The practice exam is in the student portal under course resources. So I know some of you already tried it, even though, right? Okay, I see one person already like, yep, guilty. Yep. Right, Lucas Jimenez? AKA Nurka, so you guys know. Yeah, I saw like in the first week, there's 2 of you already like testing themselves. I'm like, wait, this is like the whole exam. Don't test yourselves yet. Can we take the exam on the 23rd? Oh, on Friday? I don't have an opening for that day. No. Sorry. I will have 2 weeks later. I'm going to have on the Saturday morning. But I still want you to do this first one immediately. You know? What if you pass? That's always a chance, right? When is the last day? Next Friday, so 16, I think. On Monday, I have, so Monday the 19th, we have practice exam. So like a review of practice exam. It's elective. You don't have to be part of it if you want it. It's pretty much me going through several questions and how to break down the questions. But again, you don't have to. Okay? It's the same way we did when we have time for it. We did those review questions at the end of the chapter. The same thing, but with more in a final exam style. Okay. Same time, 5:30 to 9:30. So same time. What happens on the 20th and the 21st? So I know what happens for me. I relax. For you, you study. So for me, I relax from teaching, not from work, because I'm still doing stuff and preparing for your exam and everything. But for you guys, it's just study without having to listen to me, at least not directly. All right, ready? We're going to run this section, then take a quick break, and then we're going to go to the next section after. Financial settlement of the transaction. We have the settlement process. And the process of settlement consists of 5 basic steps. So settlement, you guys already know it's closing, right? Closing. Every time you see settlement is the actual closing. Settlement of the transaction. So these are the 5 steps. The first step is identifying the selling terms and closing costs. Defining the non-prorated debits and credits. Determine the prorated debits and credits, and I'll explain what this means in a second. Complete the closing statement. And once everything is agreed to, we disperse the funds. As far as selling terms are the price of property and the buyer's deposit and down payment. So we're going to see what the seller and buyer promised to each other. That's what's going to be in the selling terms. We're also going to check out for any brokerage fees if there's realtors involved, mortgage related fees. All that goes into these terms. Now, these are the agreed on parts. Next comes debits and credits. Where it says debit and credit, debit is a minus or a charge. Okay, so it's a minus, right? While credits is a plus. So it's an entry in your favor. Okay. So charge is something negative that comes out of the account. So when you swipe that card, what happens? It gets out of your account $100, right? And it enters wherever you purchase. Let's say you went to your grocery store, $100 less on your card. On their end, it's plus $100. Okay. So the closing statement accounts for the debits and credits of the buyer and seller to settle and complete the transaction. A debit, pay close attention to this because there might be one math question at least regarding debits and credits. And there might be a question about prorations. So, not a math question, but asking what a proration is. So, a debit is an amount that one party must pay at closing or has already paid prior to closing. And a credit is an amount that a party must receive. So it's a plus, like I said, at closing or already received prior to closing. So debits and credits. Received or receivable, like I said, is a credit. Paid or payable is a debit. It could be to either the buyer or to the seller. And we need to adjust things accordingly. And I'll explain that coming soon. The excess of the buyer's debits over the buyer's credits is the amount that the buyer must bring to the closing. So if we already put money into like a good faith deposit, whatever's the difference between what I need to bring and what I already put in is what I must put at closing. So debits and credits. The excess of the seller's credits over the seller's debits is the amount the seller will receive. So the closing was $180,000. But we had to pay off a mortgage, $120,000. We have to pay off commission, $30,000. We have to, all this stuff. How much did I take home? $20,000, right? So that's how much I received after the debits and credits. An individual expense, so we're going to talk about expenses real quick. An individual expense is item that one party owes to a party unrelated to a transaction. So individual expenses are debits to that party only. For instance, if you hire an attorney, is that paid? That is going to be paid by whom? Usually by you. So that's called an individual expense, and the attorney is a third party unrelated, right? So it's expense only, paid out. An income or expense that affects both parties is apportioned or prorated. It affects both parties. So to each party to reflect the proper amount that each owes or should receive. So a prorated item, so there's expenses and there's prorations. A prorated item is treated as a debit to one party, so a minus to one of us, and a plus to the other. For instance, if I owe the water bill, right? So what we were talking about, Yvette's case, let's say the electrical bill. If I owe $1,000 on the electrical bill, I should credit the buyer at closing for that upcoming bill. You understand? So there's money that's going to be taken out of my account as a seller, right? My account meaning at closing, what I'm supposed to receive comes of my account and it's shifted to the buyer's account. It's a plus on the buyer's side. If it was prepaid, let's say I prepaid the whole taxes for the rest of the year, and here comes Yvette and takes over my property, okay? Takes over my property. Should Yvette benefit from the remainder of the year without paying taxes? Right? The taxes that I prepaid? The answer is no. So we're going to take from Yvette a portion to credit of whatever she's paying into, a portion of whatever she's going to benefit from now on, and I receive that credit. All right? So prorations are adjustments between the related parties, seller and buyer. To address Muslima's question, what is considered unrelated to the transaction? Again, a party that's unrelated to the transaction is the attorney, for instance. A lien holder, for instance, right? A surveyor, for instance, a title company. These are expenses. They're not the seller, they're not the buyer. So who's related to the transaction? Seller and buyer. So if it's between them, it's a proration, debit and credit. We take from one, we give to the other. If it's hold on, don't be attitude. All right, since Muslima got it, can you please explain before I get Verona? Verona keeps on defending you. Like, did you answer Muslima's question regarding TRID? Right now, she said, "Hi, we're doing great." Muslima, could you explain, please? Boom. Yep. That's it. That's it. She did correct herself. In her defense, she did correct right out. All right. So I can't be. Is the attorney mandatory at closing? The answer is no. Attorney is. No attorney is mandatory. Certain states they might be. In New Jersey, for instance, not mandatory. No, you don't need attorneys for anything in the residential transaction. Okay, so Verona. So did you get it or no? Why is it an expense? Okay, cool. I did answer. Her. Okay. Bruno, it's fine. All right. All right, so right here, buyer's debits and credits. So TGIF, right? So what do we have here? Buyer's credits. What would be a credit to the buyer at the time of closing? The earnest money. So whatever you pre-deposited, right, which is the good faith deposit, it's credited towards you, the buyer, at the time of closing. So if you have to come up with money towards down payment, well, you already prepaid something, so they give you that money saying, hey, you did conclude what you said you're going to do, like the performance of this contract. So the money we were holding in escrow is now released for the purpose of the transaction, right? The loan amount is a credit if you borrowed money or if you assume it's a credit towards you. And the seller's share of any prorated items that the buyer will pay. Like I said, the electrical bill for the Yvette's case will be prorated as a credit to the buyer and a debit to the seller. So $1,000 to Yvette minus $1,000 to the seller. Is rent if it is an income property? If rent is prorated as well? Yeah, we're gonna get to that too. But yeah, absolutely. Because if we close at the middle of the month and you already collected the rents, shouldn't I get half of the month? Right? This is the question with prorations. Should you benefit of something that I already prepaid or be affected by something that I did not pay? That's what prorations is. So I'm entitled to the property from day zero on. So anything that was from before, it's either credited to me or debited from me if you already prepaid. Sorry. See, I got allergic to questions. Sorry about that. Oh, now you want to bless me in nice tiny letters. This is when you put big bold letters saying bless you. Right? This is the time you express something in bold letters. But thank you anyway. I appreciate it. Humble guy that I am, I'll take it in any way, shape, or form. Thank you so much. Thank you, Erica. There you go. All right. Next was buyer's debits. Debits are expenses. So to the buyer, the expenses is the purchase price. So you got a credit of $180,000, but you paid $200,000 for the house, right? So it's an expense. It's a minus on your side. Other expenses per agreement or custom, like title, surveys, other closing costs, whatever. So that will be debits. For the seller, we have expenses also per agreement or custom. So for instance, in New Jersey, we have the realty transfer fee that goes from the seller side. In some places, some states, you have the title insurance is paid or title search is paid by the seller. So those will go into expenses only, right? The seller's share of prorated items that the buyer will pay. So if I prepay taxes, like I said, the buyer has to give me a credit for that. And then the loan balance and or other lien to be paid off. Seller's credits. What does the seller receive? The purchase price. After all these deductions, the seller receives the purchase price and any items that the buyer was supposed to pay you. So credits. Non-prorated items or expenses only are incurred by one party only, like I said. Mortgage recording fees, right here, the buyer pays mortgage recording fees, documentary stamp tax, intangible tax on mortgage, mortgage-related fees, impound reserves, or impound, by the way. If you see this, state exam might confuse you when you see impound. It's escrow. Because they're going to say impound, but they're going to include in the question insurance and taxes. What did I tell you when you see insurance and taxes? Escrow. Okay? Escrow. When you see insurance and taxes related to a mortgage question, escrow immediately. So if you see, what is another term for impound when it relates to insurance and taxes, something like that, the answer is escrow. All right, next, what does the seller pay for? The stamp tax or the realty transfer fee tax on the deed. Title insurance, brokerage fee, inspection fees, title-related fees, or attorney fees. Again, this is what they usually pay. Every state has their own custom. Some of the things might be the buyer, other things might be to the seller, right? So you need to know what the state requires. Prorated items. So you guys already know what proration is. What I want to show you is items paid in advance. Okay, items paid in advance, so prepaid. Prepaid. Yurika's asking, around how much time do we spend at closing? Like the closing day? How much time you spend there? Well, I'm going to tell you, the fastest closing I've been to was 15 minutes. I got there, they had already closed, and I just went to collect my check, and I stayed there talking to the title company a little bit more, right? The slowest closing I had was roughly 6 hours, and that was because we were waiting on the bank in California to clear the funds. So we closed roughly at around 11:40 p.m. because we were waiting since 6 p.m. for the transaction to happen. Came 8 p.m., the Eastern office closed, so we had no way. At the time, the call routing is based on where you are, so we couldn't call. So after 8 p.m., everything was by email. We had to wait for replies, and we submitted documents, and I mean, not us, the attorney and title company, back and forth. So that one took 6 hours. But on average, get yourself ready for like 2 hours, 3 hours max. Yep. But again, you're gonna get a check of $6, $7, $8, $9, $10, $11,000. So 3 hours is not bad, right? You guys agree or no? No? I'm telling you, sitting here for 4 hours for 4 weeks, not bad. 4 hours a day, you will get compensated for it. It's gonna be worth it. I'm telling you. All right. So prepaid items, we got that. The buyer must reimburse. Simple, we already covered this. Prepaid items, buyer must reimburse the seller. So prepaid, who gets reimbursed? The seller. Who gets the credit? The seller. Okay? Items paid in arrears, or also called accrued items, right? That means they accumulate and you did not pay yet. So it's unpaid. Okay? Unpaid. So items paid in arrears, accrued, or unpaid. These three terms mean the same. That means, oh, sorry. I was distracted on this one. My bad. Accrued, like unpaid, if they're taking over mortgage taxes or mortgage interest. These are still credited to the buyer and debited from the seller. All right, who gets charged? So let's look at this one right here, this example. As I was saying before, if the closing is on August 7th, but the seller paid for the year, the seller already paid for the year, does the buyer benefit for the rest of the year? No. The buyer must credit from the 8th and on. This money must be paid to the seller. If it's a monthly expense like rent, right? Rent, as an example, right? Like rent, then we're going to figure out how many days do we have. This was August 7th closing, right? August has 31 days. So we're going to figure out what's the total cost of that month is, let's say $1,500, and we divide by 31 days. And that's going to give us what's called the daily rate. Once you have the daily rate, well, how many days are left? From 31, right? From the 8th to the 31st, we have to return those monies to the seller, right? This must be credited to the seller, so the rent, or vice versa, depending on if it's collected or uncollected, right? So once we figure out the daily rate, it's going to be daily rate times actual days. So daily rate times actual days. So we would be 1,500 divided by 31 and then times 24. Yes. Okay. Okay, you guys ready? Another difference in the book? What do you have in the book? You don't have this? Oh, we'll probably get, okay. Instead of being like that as a circle, the purpose or the point is the same, right? Okay, cool. No, I did not know. Where did I get 24? How many days do you have in August? 31. Do the reverse. Okay, that's where I got the 24 days. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Next, we're gonna do this one and then go into that to the quick break. Computing prorations. 12 months and the 30-day method. The 12-month 30-day method equals 360 days. Okay. So for accounting purposes, everything is calculated based on 12 months of 30 days even, or 360 days for accounting purposes. But we know that our calendar days are 365, right? Calendar days, right? I don't know how much of a difference 5 days would make, right? But they decided to make it 365, and then some years they add a number just to confuse us. Nothing changes, but anyway, it is what it is, right? Some people are born in the day that doesn't exist for 6 years, yet they grow old. I never understood that one. The primary methods of calculating prorations are 360 30-day method, which computes prorations on the basis of 360-day a year and 30-day a month, and the 365 method, which computes based on the actual number of days in the year. The 360-day year method or 360-day or 30-day method is commonly used for prorating mortgage interest. Either method may be used for taxes, depending on local practice. The 12-month or 30-day method determines an average daily rate of payment for an item to be prorated on the based on 30-day month or 360-day year, and the method consists on the following steps. First thing we're going to do is identify the total amount to be prorated. So like I did with the monthly rental, I said $1,500. So that's what we need to prorate first. What's the amount? Let's say it's taxes, $12,000 a year, whatever. We're going to divide that by 12 to obtain the average monthly rate. So if it's $12,000 taxes, let's make it easier right there. What is the average monthly rate? $1,000, right? Because 12,000 divided by 12, it's $1,000. We're going to divide this by 30 to obtain the average daily rate. And then multiply the monthly by the amount of, by the seller's number of months of ownership of the year of the sale up to the month of closing. For the month of closing, we multiply the seller's number of days of ownership times the daily amount, as I showed earlier. And the final result is the seller's prorated share of this item. For monthly items, like I did before, 1,500 divided by 30 times the actual number of days, it will give you that amount. So this is using the 360 or 30-day method. So it's not the actual calendar days, it's accounting days. And by the way, in the exam, they will tell you, using the 360-day method, how would you calculate this? So here's example. The question could have been, a sale transaction on a single-family house closes on March 2nd. County taxes for the previous year to be paid in arrears amounts to $1,730, and the seller owns the house through the day of the closing. That means, so they're even telling you that the day of the closing is still, that fee, that charge still belongs to the seller, not to the buyer. What are the seller's and buyer's prorated shares for this item? The total amount we said, $1,730. The monthly amount is divided by 12 is $144.17, right there. The daily amount, again, we're using the 360-30, right? 360 days or 30 days in a month. The daily amount in this scenario is $4.81. What is the seller's share? Let me take this out of here. Right here. Just sellers. What is the seller's shares? Well, if they closed on March 2nd, then the seller used that year's taxes for only 2 months plus 2 days, right? So we know how much it is monthly. It's $144.17, right? Times 2 months. So it's $288.34. The 2 days, we know that the average daily is $4.81 times 2 days is $9.62. So what is the seller's share? Well, we add these two and it's $297.96. $297.96. What is the buyer's share? The difference. The item was $1,730 minus whatever the seller used. What is the buyer's share? $1,432.04. Let's go back to the question. It says the seller sold a single family on March 2nd, so close on March 2nd. The county taxes for the year to be paid in arrears amounts to $1,730. The seller owns the house through the day of the closing. What are the seller's and buyer's prorated shares for this item? So they're asking, what is the seller's responsibility? What is the buyer's responsibility? That's all they're asking. They're not asking who pays who. In this question, they're asking what belongs to the seller, what belongs to the buyer. Okay? So you figure out the monthly, figure out the daily, add those two, and subtract from the total. So what are the closing statement entries? If they were asking you what would enter into the closing statement, it says the seller will be charged for the seller's share of the proration an amount of $297.96. Why? Because it's unpaid, right? So he's gonna be charged $297, and it will be entered as a debit to the seller and a credit to the buyer, again, because the buyer will have to pay. I want you to notice one thing. Pay attention here. Notice this. It's unpaid. It says $297 will be entered as a debit to the seller and a credit to the buyer, right? But wait, where did this amount go? Did you guys understand? Remember what I told you earlier about going to the grocery store and you swipe the card for $100? Well, it's minus 100 in your account, the buyer, and it's going to be plus 100 at the grocery store, right? So what we're trying to say here with debits and credits is that the amount that's given to one party and taken from the other is exactly the same. The question was not what the buyer gets. The question here is what enters or exits one party or the other. If it's unpaid, it's always a credit to the buyer. So what I'm trying to get at is that the state exam, you're going to look for the answer that has equal amounts. That's the first thing. Look for the answer. If it's talking about proration, look for the answer that has equal amounts. The other thing you need to look at, if there's two answers that are the same, that show 296, 296, or 297, whatever. If it shows the same in two answers, I'll give you an example in a second. If it shows the same in two answers, now you have to determine Well, is this unpaid or is this prepaid? If it's unpaid, it's a credit to whom? To the buyer. So now look for the answer that says 297, 297, credit to the buyer, debit to the seller. If it's prepaid, you're going to look for the answer that says 297 and 297. One says credit to the seller, the other one says debit to the buyer. So again, you don't need to do any of this math unless they're asking you to, unless they're specifically asking. Okay? If they're asking about prorations, they want to know who received what. The answer will be exactly the same, but they will throw you off. They will give you some answers. So you have answer A, and it says, so I'm just gonna, right there. So it says answer A says plus seller, and then they'll trick you by saying 143204 minus buyer 297. Then there's C, which is plus, I'm working on it. You wrote example. You'll say plus seller 297 minus, so debit. I'm just putting pluses on minus, but it would say debit or it would say credit, okay? I just don't have much room to write everything. So minus buyer 297. Why did I put C? B, C. Then there'll be another one that says minus seller minus seller, and they will put something similar. So here we're going to put 43204, and then here it's plus buyer 297 plus buyer 297. All right, so I know it gets a little confusing what I wrote here. I apologize for that. But what I'm trying to show you guys is simple. If they're asking, the question was, so it said right here that the closing is on March 2nd. They told you that it's in the arrears, meaning it's unpaid, and it's 1,730, right? So if it's unpaid, who gets the credit? Let me know in the chat. If it's an unpaid bill, who gets the credit? I'm going to show you how to answer this question without any math. Unpaid, who gets the credit? The buyer. Perfect. All right, so let's go process of elimination. Which one of these has a plus to the buyer? Which one of these has credit to the buyer? C and D. All right, great. So here's what we're going to do to make your life easy. We're going to erase these ones because these don't matter. We're down to 2 answers. Now, if we're talking about credits and debits, we already figure out that it's a credit to the buyer, right? So it can only be C or D. If we're talking about credits and debits, right? Let me zoom in. Then the amount must be taken from one party and given to the other, correct? So which one has equal amount? That's right. So this one does not matter. By process of elimination, did we do any math? No. Understand who is the unpaid and who is the prepaid. Unpaid is always a credit to the buyer. Prepaid is a credit to the seller. Boom. You already eliminated 2 of the answers. That was immediate. Then look for the answer that has the exact same amount. 297, 297. And boom, that's the answer. Simple as that. Okay? If it said prepaid, then you'd look for the answer that has the reverse. Plus the seller, minus to the buyer, same amounts. Okay? So again, this is what you're going to look for. Credits. If it's prepaid, it's credited to the seller. If it's unpaid, it's credited to the buyer. Simple. In the closing statement, you're going to look for answers that are exactly the same. It's taken from the buyer, given to the seller. It's taken from the seller, given to the buyer. You got it? These are prorated. Prorated means adjusted, so the balance is zero, and one party is not benefiting over the other. And then we have each one of us hired an attorney. So each one of us has a minus, an expense, because the attorney is unrelated, yet the buyer and seller are related to the transaction. So these are expenses only. Minus $1,200 for the buyer, minus $1,800 for the seller, or whatever it is that your attorney charges you. Okay? So simply understand credits and debits, and the answer will not require any math, unless they're specifically asking how much, what is the math, like for you to calculate how much did the buyer get, right? But if they're asking for prorations, prepaid, seller, unpaid, buyer, and these are equal always. Good? All right. The 365-day method is using the actual number of days. The concept is exactly the same, except we divide by 365 instead of 360. All right, so the concept is exactly the same. If we had the same question, and they want to know how much is the buyer's share. So if that's the question, what is the buyer's share versus who gets what, then you have to know how to calculate. And it's the exact same thing. 365 instead of the 12 months 30, or instead of the 360, which will give you, as you guys notice, the other one was 481, I think it was, and this one's 4.75. Slight difference between them. Okay? And again, they will tell you, using the 360 method or using the 365 method, how would you calculate this? All right? Any questions? We're going to go into a break. You guys can relax your brain. Right? I can relax my brain. And we all come back here 10 minutes later, refreshed and ready for another 4 hours. It's Friday, so we can stay a little bit longer, right? Get to hang out? No? All right. All right, so it's 7:30. Perfect, right on the dot. So we're going to go with 10 minutes. So 7:40, we will be back, guys. All right? See you guys in a bit.